she vanished without a trace. In 2008, 19-year-old Katie Palmer set out on a late-night road trip through the empty highways of rural Nevada. Hours later, her car was discovered abandoned on the side of a desolate stretch of desert road. Engines still running, headlights piercing the darkness, and no sign of Katie anywhere. For 12 years, the case went cold until investigators stumbled upon a shack hidden deep in the Nevada desert. Inside, they found chilling evidence that suggested Katie's final moments were far more terrifying than anyone imagined. A single sneaker, torn pages from her journal, and dark stains on the floor told a story the desert had tried to keep buried. What really happened to Katie Palmer on that lonely highway, and why did it take over a decade for the truth to surface? Katie Palmer's story begins in the heart of Nevada, where the desert stretches for hundreds of miles, and the silence of the land can feel both beautiful and menacing. She grew up in Henderson, a suburban community on the southern edge of Las Vegas, far removed from the neon chaos of the Strip. Henderson was the kind of place where neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns, kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and life felt safe. Katie was 19 years old in the summer of 2008. She had just finished her first year of college, studying nursing, a path inspired by her grandmother, who had spent decades working in emergency rooms. Friends remembered her as the kind of person who couldn't stand to see anyone hurting. She was the one who checked in on classmates after exams, who volunteered at a local clinic, who always carried a smile. But Katie also had a restless streak. She loved adventure, and the desert around Nevada was her escape. Friends recalled late-night drives to catch the sunrise, impromptu road trips to small towns, and her unshakable curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon. Katie was fearless, one friend later said. If someone suggested driving 3 hours just to watch the stars, she was already grabbing the car keys. Her family adored her. Elaine, her mother, described Katie as the spark in the room, someone who lit up family dinners with laughter. Her father, Robert, called her my desert girl because she never seemed afraid of its vastness the way others were. Katie's younger brother, Michael, looked up to her in every way. She was not just a daughter and a sister, she was their center. By June of 2008, Katie was in the middle of a transitional summer. She had been working part-time at a diner, saving money for school, while spending her free hours with friends. But those close to her noticed something was off. She seemed distracted, sometimes quiet. A few friends said she had been stressed over a breakup that spring. Others mentioned she felt watched on more than one occasion while driving home late at night. On June 12th, Katie told her mother she wanted to take a short road trip up north, toward the quieter desert towns near Ely. She said she wanted to clear her head, watch the stars, and maybe stay overnight in a cheap motel. Elaine didn't love the idea of her 19-year-old daughter driving alone on Highway 50, especially at night, but Katie promised to check in. She left Henderson in her blue Honda Civic just before sunset. That was the last time her family ever saw her. Katie drove north that evening, the desert sun bleeding into the horizon as she merged onto Highway 50. Known as the loneliest road in America, the two-lane stretch ran for hundreds of miles with little more than scattered gas stations and small towns to break the monotony. To most, it was desolate, even frightening. To Katie, it was freedom. Sometime around 11:45 p.m., she stopped at a gas station just outside Ely. A grainy surveillance camera captured her car pulling up to the pump. She fueled, paid in cash, bought a soda, and walked back to her Honda. The footage was poor, but you could see her ponytail swinging as she moved. That clip became the last confirmed sighting of Katie Palmer alive. From there, the timeline fractured. Investigators pieced together fragments, eyewitness accounts, and phone records, but none of it ever painted a complete picture. What they knew was this. Shortly after midnight, Katie texted a friend, saying she was watching the stars and needed the drive. Then, silence. Hours later, at 3:20 a.m., a trucker reported something strange. A blue Honda Civic sat on the shoulder of Highway 50, headlights on, engine running. No driver, no passenger, just the hum of the motor cutting into the desert quiet. By the time a highway patrol unit arrived, the car was still there, keys in the ignition, Katie's purse and cell phone inside, but no sign of Katie herself. The scene chilled investigators. It didn't look like a planned disappearance. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, as if she had stepped out for only a moment. Her flip-flops were on the floorboard. Her soda cup still sat in the console, the ice not melted. It was as if she had been plucked from the earth mid-step. Word spread quickly through the nearby towns. People whispered about the girl whose car was left running in the middle of nowhere. Some believed she had broken down and wandered into the desert, never to be seen again. Others thought she had picked up the wrong hitchhiker. More sinister theories suggested she had been followed. The Palmer family rushed to Ely as soon as they received the news. Elaine later described the moment she saw her daughter's car as like walking into a nightmare you can't wake up from. The vehicle looked untouched, ordinary, and yet Katie was nowhere. Search teams fanned out across the desert. Volunteers, deputies, and even cadaver dogs combed the scrubland for days. Helicopters scanned from above, their spotlights sweeping across endless sand and sagebrush. But there was nothing. No footprints, no discarded belongings, no trail to follow. By the end of the first week, the official search was scaled back. The unanswered question hung heavy. How could a young woman vanish so completely, with her life paused in a running car? For 12 long years, Katie Palmer's disappearance haunted Nevada's cold case files. Her name appeared in missing persons databases, her photo on posters yellowed with time, and her story was retold in hushed tones at roadside diners along Highway 50. Then, in the summer of 2020, everything changed. Two hikers exploring the desert northeast of Ely stumbled across a weathered shack, half-collapsed, hidden in a tangle of sagebrush and scrub oak. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than an abandoned shelter, the kind locals used for hunting trips or drifters used to escape the cold desert nights. But inside, the walls whispered of something darker. Scattered across the floor were torn pages from a journal. Some of the entries matched Katie's handwriting, confirmed later by her family. A single white sneaker lay discarded in the corner, caked with years of dust, but unmistakably hers. On the warped wooden planks near the back wall, investigators found something even more chilling. Faint but undeniable bloodstains, soaked into the wood grain. Detective Mark Alvarez, who had carried Katie's case since the beginning, described walking into the shack as a gut punch. For 12 years we had nothing, he recalled. And suddenly we were standing in the place where something violent happened. But it wasn't a solution. It was a wound reopened. The shack was sealed off and processed like a sacred site. Forensic teams documented every inch, from cigarette butts ground into the dirt to a half-empty beer bottle resting on a shelf. The duct tape found near the stains was logged as potential evidence of restraint. Soil samples were bagged, and every scrap of paper was carefully lifted. For the first time in over a decade, investigators had a tangible link to Katie after the night she vanished. But the evidence raised more questions than answers. Had the shack been the scene of her murder, or a temporary holding place before she was taken elsewhere? And if so, why leave behind her journal, her shoe, her blood? Was it carelessness, or a deliberate message? The shack was not just a discovery. It was a revelation. Katie Palmer had been there. She had fought, she had bled, and then she was gone again, swallowed by the desert silence. When news of the shack surfaced, it reignited attention in a case many in Nevada had assumed was beyond saving. Katie Palmer's name once again made headlines. Reporters crowded outside the sheriff's office, asking the question that had haunted investigators since 2008. What really happened to Katie? Detective Mark Alvarez led the renewed investigation. He had worked Katie's case from the beginning, sitting with her devastated parents in Henderson, organizing volunteer searches across the desert, and chasing down every lead no matter how faint. Over the years, he'd been forced to shelve the file, but he never let it go. The shack gave him a second chance. The evidence team began with forensic analysis. The bloodstains, though degraded, still yielded DNA. It matched Katie. The sneaker was hers too, confirmed by her parents. The duct tape held partial fingerprints, though too smudged to be immediately useful. The cigarette butts and beer bottle, however, offered a potential breakthrough. Traceable DNA belonging to men who had no apparent connection to Katie. The first name linked to the scene was Ray Trigger Lawson, a drifter with a long record of assault and drug charges. Lawson had lived in Ely in the late 2000s, working odd jobs at gas stations and motels. Locals remembered him as volatile, often getting into fights at bars. When questioned in 2020, Lawson denied ever meeting Katie but admitted to hanging out near the shack. Detectives pressed him, but without conclusive evidence tying him to her disappearance, he was released. Another lead came from the journal pages. Some entries had been written just days before Katie vanished. In one, she described feeling uneasy on the trip, noting, "It's like someone's following us. I keep seeing the same truck in the distance." Investigators compared this note with a 2008 witness statement from a trucker who had reported seeing a blue pickup tailing Katie's Honda Civic the night she disappeared. The pickup belonged to Calvin Briggs, a mechanic from Ely who had once lived less than a mile from the shack. Briggs had been interviewed back in 2008, but dismissed as a person of interest when nothing tied him directly to the crime. Now, with Katie's journal entry resurfacing, detectives revisited him. Briggs had since moved to Arizona, where he lived quietly with his wife. When questioned again, he claimed no memory of ever following Katie and denied being near the shack. His alibi from 2008, working a late shift at the garage, still stood, but cracks began to show under scrutiny. Alvarez and his team combed through the old case files. They re-interviewed friends who had last seen Katie before her trip. One remembered a heated phone call Katie had the night she left Henderson. Another mentioned she had argued with her boyfriend, Ryan, about the road trip itself. Detectives wondered, was this just a random abduction on the highway, or did someone close to Katie know more than they admitted? The renewed investigation also brought the FBI back in. Special agents specializing in cold cases joined the task force, bringing advanced forensic tools unavailable in 2008. They scanned the shack for trace evidence invisible to the naked eye. Under specialized lighting, fibers consistent with the upholstery of Katie's car were detected, suggesting she had been brought to the shack directly from her vehicle. Still, for every breakthrough, there were setbacks. The desert is unforgiving. Time had eroded much of the evidence. Fingerprints were partial, DNA had degraded, and memories from witnesses blurred with the years. Alvarez admitted in an interview, "It's like chasing ghosts. You know they were there, but they slip right through your fingers." Public pressure mounted. Katie's family gave emotional statements on television, pleading for answers. "We just want to bring her home," her mother said, tears catching in her throat. "It's been 12 years of nightmares. That shack gave us hope, but we need the truth." Tips poured in, many unreliable. Some claimed Katie had been taken by a serial predator passing through Nevada. Others pointed to human trafficking networks that operated along the highways. A few even suggested law enforcement had overlooked key suspects because of small-town politics. One tip, however, stood out. A former Ely resident came forward, saying she remembered seeing Katie arguing with a man outside a gas station the night she disappeared. She described him as tall, scruffy, with a tattoo on his forearm, details that eerily matched Ray Lawson. Detectives returned to Lawson, this time with more force. They collected fresh DNA, which was compared to evidence from the shack. The results were frustratingly inconclusive. His DNA appeared on one of the cigarette butts, but there was no direct link to Katie's blood or belongings. Defense attorneys could argue he had simply been in the shack at a different time. Without more, prosecutors couldn't move forward. Despite the dead ends, Alvarez and his team pressed on, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that refused to form a clear picture. The shack had given them hope, but it also deepened the mystery. Someone had taken Katie there. Someone had left her blood on those walls. Someone still knew what happened in the desert that night. The investigation remained wide open, and with every lead chased and every suspect questioned, one truth became more certain. Katie Palmer's disappearance was not random. It was personal, deliberate, and meticulously hidden beneath the silence of Nevada's desert. As investigators wrestled with the shack evidence, one chilling question lingered over every conversation. Why Katie? She was not involved in drugs, gangs, or dangerous circles. By all accounts, she was a bright, outgoing young woman with no known enemies. Yet someone had not only abducted her, but taken her to an isolated shack in the desert, leaving behind evidence of violence. The crime seemed calculated, as if driven by obsession or rage. Detectives and armchair sleuths alike debated possible motives. One theory pointed back to Ray "Trigger" Lawson. His volatile temper and history of assault suggested he could have acted impulsively, targeting Katie after a chance encounter. But if that were true, why had he seemingly covered his tracks so thoroughly? Why risk keeping her in a shack so close to town, where someone could stumble upon it? Another theory centered on Calvin Briggs, the mechanic. Investigators wondered if Katie's journal entry about being followed referred to him. Perhaps he had fixated on her after seeing her at a gas station, trailing her through the desert until he found the opportunity to act. If Briggs had an unhealthy obsession, the shack could have been his hidden lair. Yet with no direct forensic link to him, the case against Briggs remained circumstantial at best. There were also whispers of a darker explanation: trafficking. Nevada's vast network of highways, stretching from Las Vegas up through Reno and into Utah, made it a corridor for illegal trade. Some speculated Katie might have been abducted for trafficking, with the shack serving as a temporary holding site. The duct tape and restraints supported that possibility. But if she had been trafficked, why had her belongings, her sneaker, her journal pages, been left behind in such an obvious place? Katie's family struggled with the theories. Her father leaned toward believing she had been taken by someone local, someone who had watched her and planned the abduction. Her mother, meanwhile, clung to the hope that perhaps Katie had survived for some time after the disappearance, and that the shack held the key to finding out how long. For Alvarez, the motive seemed entwined with control. Whoever took Katie wanted to dominate her, to isolate her in a place where her screams would never be heard. Whether it was a crime of passion, obsession, or opportunistic violence, it was undeniably personal. And yet, the greatest mystery of all remained unsolved. No body had ever been found. No definitive suspect had been charged. The shack revealed suffering, but it didn't reveal an ending. That ambiguity left a haunting possibility in the minds of many. What if Katie Palmer had survived beyond that night in 2008, held somewhere against her will, before vanishing forever into the silence of the desert? Today, more than 15 years after Katie Palmer's disappearance, the case remains unsolved. The shack still stands in the Nevada desert, weathered by sun and sand, its boards warped and peeling. For some locals, it is a landmark of fear, a reminder of how quickly safety can vanish on an empty stretch of highway. For others, it has become a ghost story whispered to warn travelers about the dangers of the desert night. Detective Mark Alvarez retired in 2021, carrying Katie's file with him to the end of his career. In interviews, he admitted the case still haunted him. "I've worked homicides, robberies, cold cases," he said, "but Katie's is the one that stays. Because it's unfinished. We touched her life in fragments. Her car, her shoe, her journal, but not her. Never her." The FBI still lists Katie's case as open. Every few years, new technology offers a glimmer of hope, advanced DNA testing, genealogical databases, AI-assisted searches. Each breakthrough promises answers, but so far, the truth remains elusive. The fingerprint on her journal page sits in the system, unmatched, like a silent witness that refuses to speak. For the Palmer family, the waiting is its own form of torment. Her mother keeps Katie's room much the same as it was in 2008, as though preserving it might hold back time. Her father drives Highway 50 once a year, stopping near the mile marker where Katie's car was found. I stand there, he once told a reporter, and I try to listen. I try to feel if she's still out there. What happened to Katie Palmer in the desert of Nevada remains one of the state's most unsettling mysteries. Was she taken by a drifter, claimed by a predator who used the shack as his lair? Or did her story become tangled in something larger, darker, and far beyond what anyone has yet uncovered? The evidence leaves us with fragments, but not a conclusion. A shoe in the dust, pages torn from a journal, blood that whispers of violence, but not of closure. And so, the shack stands, silent, waiting, holding answers that may never come. But Katie's story is not the only one. Behind every disappearance lies another mystery demanding to be told. Stay with us, subscribe, and be here when the next chapter begins.